So, hey gamers, Yoshi here, and in today's stream slash video, this is being streamed on Twitch because Vegas Pro sucks dick and will not let me render one of the tier lists I made earlier, so I'm just streaming it to Twitch and then uploading it directly to YouTube later so that I won't run into any problems. So for this first tier list, I'm going to be going over the exotics in Destiny 2, the exotic weapons, and rate them for PvE use. This is strictly for PvE use, not for PvP. So you may see some of these guns ranked much lower than you may believe them to be. For example, a gun like Sturm. In PvP, it's top tier, but as a PvE gun, Sturm is not that strong, if I am to be blatantly honest with y'all. So let's get right into it. So first up we got, let's do, I guess, all the bows. So coming in first, we have Taiku's Divination, I believe is how you say it. This is, right now, I'd say it's an S tier bow. It's very, very strong, especially with the catalyst, with the Sacred Flame stacks that you get from the catalyst. It's very good at for taking out enemies and ad clear in general, and especially with the Overload bow champion mod we have this season. Taiku's is definitely a pick to take, especially if you need a solar bow and endgame content. I really love using this thing. Its explosion also is very strong for ad clearing, if I may, to clarify that. Next up we have, in the bow department, we have Le Monarch. Le Monarch I'd put at probably a B right now. Could be a little higher at A tier, but for the most part, what's keeping it back is you can't make orbs with it. Doesn't have a catalyst yet, which is weird. I really wish it would have a catalyst. The other thing is that to proc its perk, you have to shoot at when you've drawn at like its height. So if you hold it longer than at its like height and draw point, you're not going to be able to proc its perk properly, which I really think is keeping it back. If you have Oathkeepers on as a hunter, you can make these Le Monarch work really, really well, but the thing is, not everyone's a hunter and not everyone likes to run Oathkeepers. Oathkeepers aren't exactly a great hunter exotic to be using in PvE in the first place, so kind of is really holding it back. This bow is definitely not a C tier or D or F. It's not like average, it's above average. The poison is pretty useful when you get to proc. I do like using this bow, and especially with the champion mods, it makes this bow is pretty damn good this season. Next up, we have Leviathan's Breath, and I'm gonna have to give Leviathan's Breath. I mean, with the catalyst, you get deeper reserves, but the thing is, I don't see anyone using this. I personally myself don't use it for PvE activities. Yeah, you can stun unstoppables with it, but really, you could just use an unstoppable hand cannon or unstoppable pulse or whatever is coming up in the future to do the job better than what this can do. Plus, you're also sacrificing your heavy slot to use Leviathan's Breath, and Leviathan's Breath isn't a massive DPS gun or weapon, if you will. It's not really a gun, it's a bow. So I'm gonna have to give it F tier. Even with the catalyst is not really doing much for it. It's F tier for me, unless they give it some significant like damage buff or boost or whatever. It's gonna be F tier for me. Next up, we have, going down the list here, we've got Trinity Ghoul. This is also another S tier PvE exotic, especially if you have the catalyst. Once you get the catalyst on this bad boy, this thing just goes to town on ad clearing. Definitely not gonna be a boss, or well, maybe with elites you can kill some elites or damage them for a significant portion of their health, but for boss damage you're definitely sacrificing a slot for the bow. However, with the recent buff to rockets in this game, you can definitely bring in a rocket that can compensate for your lack of exotic boss damage utility. So with the Catalyst, this thing is definitely S tier. It is an ad clearing beast. It is really easy to proc the perk now that you need any old arc kill will do it for it. It's pretty damn strong. Next up we have Wish Ender. Wish Ender from me is probably for PvE probably gonna, it's not as bad as Leviathan's Breath because you have more ammo with it and you do piercing damage with it. So when your bow hits your target, it will do the initial impact damage and then it pierces your target for bonus damage. It was bugged at one point where you would do like 5 times the amount of piercing damage. It was meta in Gambit. Everyone was using this thing to do boss damage. It's a D tier for me, mostly because it's single shot. You're not chaining multiple kills like you can do with Taiku's or Trinity, and kind of with the headshot proc of the Monarch. Can't really do that. It's limited by the fact that it's single target and it won't chain to multiple targets. However, it's over Leviathan's Breath since really it's just more ammo. It's just slightly, in my opinion, the utility from this is just slightly better than this. I feel like because this bow waste takes up your heavy slot, you're really hurting yourself. Like you can't take a rocket in combination with this because it's taking up your heavy slot. With Wish Ender, you can take a rocket or a GL or a sword or whatever, but with this you can't. So that's why it's a D tier instead of an F tier for me. And in terms of the bow department here, I believe I've covered all the bows. So next up, we're going to be talking about scout rifles. First scout we got here is Dead Man's Tale, and if you can get a Vorpal roll, I think DMT is definitely a god tier roll, a god tier gun to be using. However, because of the random rolls you have to get on this thing, it is really keeping it back from being S tier. The other thing, it is primary scout. If you have the Catalyst, yeah, you can shoot faster, hip fire, but it's, I don't know. It's just not a really reliable boss melting device. It's safe to use and it's definitely good. It's just that the fact that it is random rolling kind of keeps it, I think, from being like S tier. Because you have to get the Vorpal roll in the first place for it to be any good, or fourth time's the charm, really, for it to be any good. I really don't think Outlaw or Killing Winds or I can't remember what else it can get. Like Moving Target is really that great for PvE. You're really going to be wanting to aim for 4 times the charm or Vorpal. If you get Vorpal, then it probably brings it up to S tier. But the fact that you have to grind for a random roll in the first place is really keeping it back for me from being S tier. Also, it just, I don't know. It just, for me, I can't exactly explain why, but I guess it's more of a feeling thing. It's really, I guess it's maybe a little bit of a feeling thing that's keeping it back from being an S tier for me. It just also feels like there's better exotics to be using in place of Dead Man's Tale. Next up in the scout rifle department, we've got, I'll make sure to, we have Mida Mini Tool. Gonna give it an F tier, mainly because this is a PvP gun. If you have gotten the Catalyst only drops from competitive PvP, if it still even drops, if it's still not bugged. Yeah, you get radar all the time, but who cares when you want to be doing damage? DMT outclasses Midas every day of the week. I'm not sure why you would want to bring a Mida multi-tool. You don't really need radar in PvE too much, or at least when you're ADSing all the time. I guess maybe that's a slight benefit, but this thing is not doing any more damage than this thing can do, especially when this thing can get Vorpal and this thing cannot. Next up, we've got Polaris Lance. Polaris Lance is definitely going to have to be an A tier for me. Um, I wouldn't say it's S tier in terms of PvE exotics. I feel like scouts, that's probably what I mean with the DMT. Scouts are in kind of a weird location. They're really good in Grandmaster content where you have to poke and prod at enemies from a distance. However, for majority of PvE content, you're probably not going to be bringing Polaris Lance in. The other thing I really don't like about Polaris is that it's really bulky. I don't like how the model looks. If you have, I think one of the ornaments, it looked a little less bulky. It's the sights are cleaner. But if you don't have that ornament, well, it's like, yeah, it sucks to use the gun if you don't have the ornament. Um, it technically creates infinite ammo off of headshots. You can keep blasting forever and ever. If you have Mantle of Battle Harmony for Warlock, I think it definitely pairs well with his exotic, especially when you have your super up and you're constantly killing ads with this bad boy. Um, but I think, yeah, the model and the place where scouts stand in all of PvE kind of keeps it back from being an S tier for me. I just think that these scouts are really useful in PvE GM content, but if I'm doing like patrol, I'm probably not going to be using this. Or if I'm doing a raid, I'm probably not going to be using Polaris Lance, and I'm probably not going to be using Dead Man's Tale if I'm doing a raid. Next up, we have Skyburner's Oath, and I'm going to just give this a C tier. It's not D tier because of the perks that it gets. It can pierce Cabal shields, the Phalanx shields with it, and certain other shields like the big immunity shield in Proving Grounds. I believe Skyburners can pierce that. However, its weird firing rate, um, the modes switching between ADS and hipfire is rather. Um, I think it's just kind of stupid for the gun. While hip firing, you get the tracking or whatever, but it's like less consistent because it's not hit scan. Um, I believe it's not hit scan. I believe it's projectile based when you're hip firing, and then when you ADS, it's hit scan. But I'm not too sure about that. Um, it's been a while since I've looked into that. It's not a high damaging gun like Polaris or DMT is. It's just an okay gun. If there's cabal enemy types in the PvE activity you're doing, then you're gonna get a little bonus from it. However, it's just an okay gun. Next up in the scout rifle list, we've got Jade Rabbit. Just gonna give it an F tier. Jade Rabbit, you need to hit body shots in order to do increased crit shot damage. However, in PvE where crit shots is all that really matters, you're not going to be hitting body shots with your gun, especially also when the catalyst has you focusing on using Jade Rabbit in PvP. PvP, you're more likely to be going for body shots and then hitting a headshot if you can't always hit headshots in PvP. Um, Obviously, this would have a higher standing in this tier list if it were PvP. However, we're talking about PvE, F tier for me. You're always going to be trying to hit headshots in PvE, not body shots. Next up, I believe, is nothing. I think I've hit all the scout rifles. Just want to make sure I don't miss any here. Oh, here we go. Missed one. Symmetry. Symmetry. I don't know. I'll give it C tier. It's like Skyburner's Oath. It's good. It's not great. Or it could be better. It's definitely not as bad as Skyburners. It's probably slightly better than Skyburners, to be honest, since the symmetry, the revolution shots do big lots of damage when you proc it. However, it's just slightly underwhelming, this gun, even though it is a 260 scout, it's full auto. The revolution shots do massive amount of damage. However, it's really hard to get the catalyst for this gun. It requires a lot of grinding. I don't even know if you can still get the catalyst or not for this gun because of how the system works. I'm not sure how the catalyst drops, if you can still pick it off of Banshee. However, I do know if you can pick it off of Banshee, it requires an insane amount of grinding in order to get this. So this catalyst, so I'm not really sure. The catalyst definitely makes it better. It keeps it in the C tier for me. However, I guess without the catalyst, it would definitely be sitting at D tier. But since I have the catalyst, I'm judging most of these weapons with the catalyst. I'm going to place it at C tier. Definitely would be slightly better than Skyburners, but I'm not putting Symmetry at B tier. This would be probably like C+, and then Skyburners would be like a C- maybe. But that's my take on the Scouts. So next up, we're going to be covering sniper rifles because it's just the next one up in this line here. So we have Cloud Strike. Cloud Strike, I'm going to give it a B tier. Probably like a B-, honestly. Reason being that with the fix that it got, it really only does as much damage as a triple tap legendary sniper rifle will be doing. Yeah, I guess you could be using it for like ag clear, but snipers aren't really being used for ag clear in the meta, or really have ever been used for lots of ag clear. Sometimes they're used to get rid of elites and majors and whatnot, but most of the time you're going to be using snipers to be doing damage to bosses. Not a lot of ad clear going on with this weapon. It's a little bit better in PvP, but PvE, especially with after its fix / nerf, whatever you want to call it, it's not as good as a legendary, as some triple tap legendary sniper rifles. I think that's really what's keeping it back from being higher, but it's not as bad. It's definitely better than these two Scouts, that's for sure. And it's definitely better than the Monarch. I'd probably give this like a B+. Next sniper rifle, we've got Borealis. Borealis, I don't know. C tier? Probably like D tier. I mean, if I put it, nah, D tier's unjust. If I put this D tier, then these would have to be, these would have to be like F tier, because these do not stand above Borealis. Borealis is a sniper rifle, 72 RPM, technically. It shoots slow. Yeah, you can change between all three elements, and yeah, with Ionic Return, you can one-shot Guardians, I believe, in PvP. However, in PvE, if you take off a shield, you do increase damage. I guess that's good, but it's like, and it reloads from reserves, I believe. It's just, I don't know. It's if you get hit once while using this thing, it's like you're flinched to like hell and back, or whatever you want to, whatever I'm trying to go for here. You get hit once by a drag and your reticle just flinches so hard off of targets. It's just really annoying to use this gun because of that. And it's not a big dick damage gun. There's definitely legendary sniper rifles that outclass Borealis in the energy slot. So that's kind of what's keeping it back from being higher. But its overall perks keep it at the C tier. Next up, we have Darcy. Darcy, I'm gonna give it C tier, mostly because even though Darcy rapid fire frame technically does a lot of damage, especially when you have the catalyst and you've marked your targets, the thing is, there are just better exotics to be using in the heavy slot over Darcy. And if Darcy, maybe if it were to be made a special, I know a lot of people are like jerking for that to become a thing. Maybe that could redeem it and make it higher, like A tier or something. But the fact that it has to compete with so much more, so much better weapons in its slot, that it's really keeping it back from higher. However, it still does a significant amount of damage. So if you have Darcy and you have nothing else that you can use, then definitely use Darcy, because it's definitely better than everything else below it, and definitely better than a lot of these things. So actually, yeah, I'll give it C tier. I'll bump it up to the B tier just because of what it can offer to you. Next up, we've got Izanagi's Burden, instant S tier. Even with all the nerfs it has received, this gun is still a beast. It still does so much damage, so much burst damage. It is such a good and reliable sniper rifle to use. It's easy to use. You just hold R, it procs honed edge. If you have the catalyst for this bad boy, and it does a hell of a lot more damage than without the catalyst. It's just a damn good gun, and it's just always been good. Even with the nerf it got, with the reload nerf, it's still really good. I still see a lot of people using it and endgame content. I personally have used it in some endgame content, so it's definitely deserves to be an S tier weapon. Moving on, we have Whisper of the Worm. Whisper of the Worm, I'm gonna have to give it. It's tricky. I think I'm gonna have to move Darcy back down to C tier and give Whisper B tier. Just because Whisper is slightly better than Darcy, does a little bit more damage, especially if you have Whisper Breathing proc. It can reload from reserves, which is a nice little feature. Of course, it doesn't have infinite ammo like it used to back when it was first reintroduced, which is weird because its D1 counterpart could make infinite ammo. Then they nerfed it to not make infinite ammo. So they clearly didn't learn from their mistakes in D1 for some reason. I'm not sure why that happened with this gun, but that's just how it turned out. Whisper does a significant amount of damage still. It looks really cool. Um, I know I'm not rating really on its coolness factor, but I would say that kind of contributes to its placement. It's it's not as good as Izanagi's. It's very slow firing. Izanagi's feels like it just because even though with Izanagi's reload nerf, it just does more damage when you proc toned edge versus this is slow fire rate and waiting for hollow breathing to proc and all that. This just does a little bit more and faster than this can do, even though it would be like an overtime thing. And plus, you have to hit crits for you to proc its perk. Sometimes that can be hard to do, especially when you're getting flinched. This is like a one and done type of deal. And then on top of Izanagi's, you can bring in a heavy, like a rocket launcher or a Geo or a sword or whatever. And I think that's it for the snipers. Let me just double check here. Alrighty, that's it for the sniper rifles. Next up, we have the hand cannons. Ace, gonna give it C tier. Mm, I feel like that's pushing it a little bit. C tier mostly because you can get Mento Mori off of kills. It's semi decent ad clear. You get the kill, you proc Mentamori on the reloads, you proc Dragonfly or Firefly, sorry, off the headshot. When you ADS, you have your radar up, blah blah blah. If you get a headshot, it's got Outlaw on the reload, so it's pretty good. However, you're sacrificing your exotic slot for a semi okay PvE hand cannon where you could be using like I don't know Whisper of the Worm or Polaris Lance over it, where Polaris has like infinite ammo technically, and the explosions do a lot more damage than the explosions from this. And the base damage of this, I'm pretty sure, does a little bit more than this. Or you could be definitely be using Izanagi's over this, and just be using like Ikalos SMG with the Izanagi's Burden. It's just there are way better options to be using, but I'm not gonna discredit the fact that it's got a lot of really good perks working in its favor that keeps it at the C tier. Next up, we have Crimson. Crimson, gonna have to give it a C tier as well. Reason being is that when you have the catalyst, I can't remember if the catalyst is what makes it do this part of the weapon, but getting headshots with Crimson refills your mag infinitely, creates infinite ammo. It also heals you completely, which is pretty good in most content. However, not that useful in endgame content now that I think of it. Definitely is what is keeping it from being higher. It's an okay gun to be using. I definitely don't know if these two guns probably really D tier, honestly. I don't think that, just like in consideration for endgame content, I would probably, like, I don't even know if I would use Skyburners over these things in endgame content. Skyburners is more of a D tier for me. Symmetry does a little bit more work. However, you wouldn't catch me using Symmetry in endgame content either. However, overall, Symmetry just does a better job than this, and Symmetry is probably gonna offer you a little bit more utility than Ace, maybe, but I don't know if it offers as much utility as Crimson, because Crimson's healing is pretty good in PvE content, especially if you're by yourself and you're not a Warlock or a Hunter with Wormhusk. Um, I think that's what bumps it up for me. Ace, yeah, Ace doesn't get you healing like Crimson done, and Crimson's is more like a pulse, so you can shoot faster, reloads pretty fast, especially when you get the precision kills. It refreshes the mag, so definitely higher than Ace. Definitely deserves that C tier. Next, we have Ariana's Val, S tier for me. Although you don't see as much people using it now that we have a little bit more access, or variety to use to pick from, now that champion mods slot onto our armor instead of slotting onto the weapons. um, Ariana's is not as prominent as it once was. However, it is still a damn fine gun, or good gun to be using. Armor, intrinsically armor piercing rounds on it. It's pretty good for champion content. When you get the catalyst on this bad boy, you get 9 rounds in the mag, and then it also has auto loading. Really nice feature to have with this gun, especially you can switch to another weapon and then switch back. It does use special, so it would consume your special. You probably wouldn't be running double special in PvE content or endgame content, especially you wouldn't be running double special unless it's like a raid and you know what you're doing, like Tanix. But yeah, it's definitely S tier for me. It's very, very useful, especially with a catalyst. Catalyst definitely pushes it to S tier. Next hand cannon, we've got Lumina. Lumina, gonna give it the D tier. And reason being it's not F tier is because you can get the damage boost off of it. It's like a 30%, 35% damage boost off of it, and then you can heal people if you're the Warlock, I think. Or I don't know if it heals people already. And then if you have the Catalyst, you get 2 noble rounds per kill, which is definitely nice to have. But it's just, I would even take Ace over Lumina, honestly, just because Ace has a little bit more going on for it. This is more like of a team based weapon. You would want teammates. If you're solo, you're definitely not going to be wanting to use Lumina because you're not going to be able to benefit from its perks. So honestly, F tier really, because if you're solo, which I know most people are, they are solo. They play solo PvE. They do a lot of PvE content solo. You're definitely not going to have a teammate. So F tier for me. You're missing out on being able to abuse its perks because you're by yourself most of the time in PvE content. Maybe, yeah, I can't really find another way to spin it to be a D tier. Next up, we have Malfeasance. Malfeasance, gonna give it a B tier, especially since you do, even if it isn't a taken, you do increase damage to taken targets. However, even if it isn't taken, after you hit 5 shots, you get that huge taken explosion for large amounts of damage. With a 180 buff, it's got 20 in the mag. It's definitely quite reliable, this gun. I would take it over Crimson just because you can do that big burst damage. However, it feels weird putting it in the same tier category as um, Whisper of the Worm and Cloud Strike. I don't know if I would take Malfeasance over Whisper of the Worm. This would probably be like a B minus, and this would be like a B plus, if not like an A minus, really. Um, Honestly, yeah, that's about where Malfeasance sits. It's definitely better than Crimson in terms of tiering the hand cannons here, just because of that potential to do large amounts of damage. Next up, we have Sturm, and Sturm, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to give it the F tier treatment here. It is a god tier hand cannon to be using in PvP. However, PvE speaking, it just doesn't do it. Like, heck, I'd take Ace, definitely take Ace over Sturm. Sturm, you would have to use Drain with it to abuse its or to really take use of its perk set. However, combining a sidearm with this hand cannon, especially in PvE content and endgame, including it in endgame content, sidearms really don't have a place in endgame content. Maybe in some forms of lower end PvE content. However, I can't justify using Sturm and Drain. Maybe Sturm and a sniper rifle, but even that, you're missing out on this overcharge of Sturm now. Yeah, you can reload your energy weapons with Sturm, but it's just like, God, you have to use Drain to get the most out of this, and you're not going to be using Sturm and Drain in PvE content. It's a PvP weapon at heart. Next up, we have Sunshot. Sunshot, um, I'm gonna give it C tier. C tier, maybe maybe B minus, just because of its ad clearing potential on low tier ads. However, you can't really do a lot of damage to elites like you could with this, and then you're sacrificing your energy slot for Sunshot. There's not a lot of kinetic specials in the game currently. Um, Maybe its ranking would go higher in future seasons when we have access to more kinetic specials. However, the fact that there are so many energy specials currently, you're taking up the energy slot for this weapon. Um, yeah, the Sunshot explosions make for good ad clear, but I find that the Sunshot explosions are only really useful on lower tiered red bars. The beefier red bars, this gun's not as great to be using against those enemies. So C tier for me. It's definitely better than Skyburners. It's definitely better than Wishender, and I would say it's better than Ace just because you don't have to hit headshots to proc its perk. You can just spam the crap out of this gun to make it work. And then just like I feel like Ace has to compete, yeah, with Izanagi's. That's what you're competing with, or you're competing with a Dead Man's Tale or a Malfeasance. So Ace just, yeah, D tier still. Sorry. Sorry to all the Ace lovers. Next up is Last Word. Sorry, instant F tier from me. This thing is designed to be used in PvP. You're not going to be hip firing ads a lot. I know you can hip fire with this gun, but this gun has Vorpal on it and it shoots faster um, than its ADS. I know this shoots faster in its hip fire, I believe, and does more damage um, in its hip fire versus the ADS. However, the range on this gun is doo doo. The damage on this gun is doo doo. The mag size on this gun is doo doo. It has nothing going for it. Why would you use this when you could use this or Malfeasance or Crimson even? Crimson's like a pulse rifle. Why wouldn't you use any of these guns over this? This thing, if anything, if there's a tier below this, I would just put it down there and it's just absolutely useless. Next we have Thorn. Thorn D tier treatment. I know you can burn things, and if you get the souls or whatever, soul devourer, a perk proc, you can do bonus damage. And then if you're wearing the necrotic grips as warlock, you can make the necrotic splashes go around. However, strictly speaking, if you aren't a warlock with necrotic grips, you're not going to be getting the most out of this exotic then. And most people are probably not going to be using necrotic grips all the time when they're playing PvE content. I don't see a lot of people using necrotic grips and Thorn in the first place. Um, it's definitely already better than this, for sure. I wouldn't say it's good as Ace. Ace is probably like D plus or C minus, and this is probably just like a D or D minus, really. Mm, I know I feel like I'm really pushing it, making this D tier. Probably belongs as a C tier just because some of the utility you get using Ace over some of these guns. It's just, I don't know. You don't see Ace in Ink. I see more of this than I do of this, of Ace. So Ace is probably like C minus, really. C minus for me, that is. In terms of hand cannons, we have, I think, one left here. Hawkmoon. Hawkmoon, uh, with Catalyst and with, I mean, it doesn't have a lot of PvE perks really per se. It's more of a PvP gun. However, don't sleep on Hawkmoon. Definitely does a lot of damage. Does way more damage than Malfeasance. Definitely would take Hawkmoon over Malfeasance. Don't know if I would take it over Izanagi's, for sure, or but it's like on par with Dead Man's Tale, especially if you have the paracausal shots stacked together, and if you have the catalyst, you get one additional shot on top of that, and then you have like the increased handling, movement bonus, et cetera, with the stacks on the catalyst. It's a pretty good gun. It does a lot of damage on its damage output to headshots on the final blow, that is. So this is probably like an A minus, where this is like an A plus, especially if this has Vorpal. So I'd probably take this over this, but I wouldn't take it over something like this or something like this, or these two. So in terms of hand cannons, I believe that's it. Just double checking here. Yep, that's it. So next up we have grenade launchers. Anarchy, instant S tier. If there was a tier above S, this would be the OP tier. Everyone is rocking this thing. It is so good in all levels of content. I definitely see a nerf coming to Anarchy in the future. If you don't already have this gun, definitely pick it up off the exotic kiosk as your first exotic to take. Definitely get this over this. I would take this over this any day of the week. I would take Anarchy over any of these weapons any day of the week, just because of how much damage over time it can do, and the combination of weapons you can use with it. It's such a good weapon to be using. It just does so much damage. It's good for like things like ad clearing, when you put the stickies on the ground and you make the little chains. You can spawn kill ads. It's good for champion nuking. It's good for boss nuking. It's just good for everything. Next up in the grenade launcher department, we have not a lot, actually, if I remember correctly. I will be including Fighting Lion as a grenade launcher for it. I know it's a breach launcher like Witherhoard, but just to round all the grenade launchers together, I'm putting it with it. Fighting Lion, F tier for me. Yeah, it uses primary instead of special. However, this is more of like a PvP type of weapon, I believe. The catalyst just increases its reload speed, which honestly, if you use Fighting Lion for so long to finish the catalyst and then you finally get the catalyst, you're going to be like, wow, I don't even notice the increase in the reload speed, or the decrease in the reload speed. It just feels the same. Definitely wouldn't ever take something like Fighting Lion over a Cloud Strike or over a Le Monarch. It's not really meant for being used for boss damage. I guess you could use it for ad clearing, but you could take Witherhoard over this for ad clearing. You could take Anarchy over it for ad clearing. You could take Polaris Lance over it. it's not a very good gun. Its role is more fulfilled in the PvP area than it is in the PvE area. Next up, grenade launchers and breach launchers. We've got ourselves the colony. Colony, you can do some nifty things with it, like in Crown of Sorrows, when Crown of Sorrows was still available, you could kill the immune knights, and some enemies you can kill immune or breach like immunities. However, the robots, the insectoids, I don't believe are that great at tracking things, especially when it's like they track a single target and they can get confused with multiple targets. It's definitely not a boss damage. It's like a meme gun. You're gonna see this more in PvP because it's just like fire and forget in PvP. You fire off the little insectoids, they seek to their targets, they explode, and that's just how it is. It's just not like this destroys this. This definitely also destroys this in the DPS department as well. It's just kind of like a meme gun now. At least in terms of PvE, it's just kind of a meme gun. Grenade launchers. We've got the Prospector. C tier. It's not bad like Skyburners, but it's not good like Whisper. It with the perk with its catalyst, you get full auto, or I think by itself it has full auto. I can't remember. And its nades do burn damage when they stick to the target, and when you release the trigger, they all explode. So it's like Demo Man, I guess, from TF2 kinda. It's just that I feel like rocket launchers just kind of outclass this gun a little. However, it's not that it's complete trash, but it's not like it's really good either. I would definitely take this over an Ace, so Ace would like be a C minus to this being like a C plus or something. But I don't see a lot of people using this. It used to be really good for Riven, however, GL's got the nerfs and whatnot, and better weapons exist over this, so it's just C tier. It's just an okay gun. If you have it, use it, because if you don't have any of these better weapons, then definitely use this if you have it. But, it's not topping the charts for me. Next up in the grenade launcher department, we've got Salvation's Grip, F tier. Stasis crystals it makes, not really good. Pretty good when you could breach walls with this, but that's been patched, so not really good anymore. You can't really do boss damage to it because it creates the crystals, not like an explosion or whatever. I mean, if you've got this weapon and you know how it works, yeah, F tier. Next up, Wither Horde. Wither Horde, I think still has a place as being an S tier weapon, especially with the catalyst where it gives it auto loading and increased handling. It just does a really good job at ad clear. It can substitute for boss damage if you don't feel like using Anarchy, or if you don't have Anarchy. When you direct shot a target with Wither Horde, it attaches to the target and does tick damage, and then at the same time you can put a Wither Horde pool at that target's feet and it will also do tick damage. So you're doing two forms of tick damage. If you kill an enemy with Wither Horde, that enemy dies and drops a Wither Horde pool on its corpse. That is only if you get a direct hit with the Wither Horde. The pool lasts forever, especially if you play PvP. You'll know that people who use that shit, it's just cancer because it lasts forever. I can only imagine the PvE ads freaking hate us for using it because those pools last forever. They do so much tick damage. It's just a really good gun to be using. S tier for me. And I think that covers all the GLs. Let's just double check here. Grenade launchers are all good to go. All right. Next, I'm going to be doing all the fusion rifles. Linear fusions included into this. Just want to do them, and trace rifles included in this, just for simplicity's sake. So first up, we have Arbalest. Arbalest, you can pierce shields with it. However, most endgame content, you're not going to be using this. You're just going to use the shield, your energy type that matches the shield and match game, and you'll have your teammates using the same matching. It's a cool gun, but it's just not. It just doesn't do what something like Malfeasance, I guess, could do better, or Hawkmoon could do better over this. Yeah, it can shield pierce, but you can't pierce anti-barrier shields obviously with it, and then you can't I don't know, it's red dot. You can't like really. It's harder to hit enemies from afar than with a normal sniper scope. It's just kind of in a weird limbo, I feel like. It's just, yeah, it just exists. But it's not a D tier. It's definitely doing more damage than this can do and this can do. And because of its shield piercing perk, it's a little bit better than this. Next up, fusion department, we have Bastion, the only kinetic fusion. This is a linear, but this is the only kinetic, just fusion. Bastion PvE. It's good for some content, but like I would take this. I don't honestly, these D tier really for me. Like I probably take this over this just because of how much damage this thing does. And it shoots in a 3 burst. It does 1, 2, 3. And this is just a single shot. So this is like D plus, D minus. Yeah, you can like melt majors with this and elites or whatever. But I don't know if you would necessarily be using this against bosses. I know it's technically a I guess slug. I'm not really sure. It's like a shotgun. It's a shotgun fusion rifle. It's a shotgun with a charge time that does a shit ton of damage. But not really. D tier. Next up, fusion department, we have a trace rifle. We have Cold Heart. Cold Heart, C tier. Damage over time increases if the target hasn't died. However, what I don't like about Cold Heart is it doesn't reload after getting a kill, which is what I like about Prometheus Lens. Prometheus Lens, when you get a kill, it reloads after that kill, and then after you get the kill, and continuing on with Prometheus Lens, the orb keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So if you get a kill, it reloads from reserves. The orb keeps getting bigger and bigger. This, if you run out of ammo, it's not going to reload from reserves. Yeah, you're doing increased damage over time, but it's just like, I don't know, I would use this over this. I probably wouldn't be using this over this. Although the ammo economy for this is slightly better than trace rifles, because trace rifles don't have their own scav mods currently. I have no idea why Bungie forgot to add trace rifle scavs into the game. Technically, these were auto rifles back in the day, but they've since changed that. Now they use special, and then they never added in the trace rifle scav, so it's just D tier because it's missing out on that auto loading function, whereas Prometheus does. Even though this technically, I guess, would be better to be using against bosses than this. It's just, I feel like the perks on this combine better than the perks on this for a general PvE usage. Definitely wouldn't be using these in endgame content, but overall, pretty solid. C tier, D tier. Next up, we have Divinity from Shadowkeep, S tier. Being able to create a giant crit bubble that just is really easy to hit for friendly players, especially for GM content where you can just nuke champions. In the past, it used to be 2 Izanagi's, 1 Divinity. Divinity person would tag the champion, get the champion with the crit bubble. Then you would do the honed edge shots on the Divinity crit bubble. It would just absolutely delete the champion from existence, especially when this had Catalyst proc, the 6 times stacks. And then this in just all walks of content, it just is very extremely helpful. It's probably not as helpful if you're a solo player, obviously, because you don't have teammates that benefit off of your crit spot that you're creating. However, in most content, PvE content, you're still matchmaking with randoms. In raids, it's useful. In GMs, it's probably so useful. I don't know how, I haven't seen a lot of GM usage, but it probably has a place in GM or master usage at least. It's a pretty damn good trace rifle. Probably makes Shadowkeep still worth it to get. It's just to get it for this exotic. Next up in the fusion rifle department, we have Jotun, however the toaster, if you will. Gonna give it a B tier just because it does so much damage. I used to use this thing in Crown of Sorrow just to deal with the knights and the wizards that spawn, the majors, the elites, because they would just one shot them. It's pretty good in that aspect. It just does a lot of damage. The explosion does a lot of damage. Could be good for ad clearing. However, not very good for boss damage. Probably wouldn't take it over Whisper. This would be like a B minus. This would be like a B plus. Honestly, should probably just bump up Whisper at this point to A. Definitely would take a Whisper over a Cloud Strike, but also would take it over a Jotun, a Toaster. So B tier for me. A tier now for Whisper. Next, we have Sniper Rifle. Or Fusion. We have Merciless. B tier. Honestly, nah, more like C tier. I know the charge time lessens every time your target doesn't die, and you spray them with all the bolts, and then you can get a kill clip, like perk when you get a kill and reload with this weapon. However, it's just I feel like I would take this a toaster over Merciless just because you can nuke elites in pretty much one shot versus I'm pretty sure you can't nuke elites with this thing. It takes like 2 bursts in order to do that job. I know it's a fun gun to use. It's just fun doesn't exactly equate to survivability and staying alive and usefulness and endgame content or most walks of PvE content. So yeah, C tier for me. Next up, we have 1000 Voices. A tier for me. Don't know if it's S tier just because Anarchy is just slightly better than it. Izanagi slightly better. These in terms of ad clear a little bit better than this because this is limited by its ammo. I definitely say 1K is better than Whisper. Whisper is Whisper would be like an A minus and 1K would be like an A plus. If you don't have Xenophage, 1K is a good alternative. If you're Warlock, 1K is nice to use because you reload faster, then you can reload faster, reload a Xenophage versus 1K. It's also fun to use. It's a death laser beam that you can use to play MS Paint and kills anything that you spray with. Its fun factor, while albeit not kind of like how Merciless is, it's just it does more damage. It's better. It overall it's just better than this, and it's a heavy, so you're doing more damage overall. Next fusion we've got is a linear fusion rifle. It's sleeper D tier just because with LFRs like this is probably doing more damage than this. Even if you have the catalyst with this, it just feels like this will be doing way more damage than this. This However, Sleeper is still doing more damage than this and like anything in the F tier. However, in the place that LFRs are currently in the game, it's just not a very good place to be right now. They just don't do enough damage for me to justify using Sleeper over any of these other higher tiered exotics. Like, even if this is technically a heavy, so you could do boss damage with it, I would still take a Sunshot over it and just have a rocket instead of using Sleeper. Because it's just better. It's just better than this in terms of the damage department. Um, Next fusion we've got is Telesto. Telesto, A tier. Um, Honestly, could be as far as S tier. However, I wouldn't take a Telesto over an Anarchy. I wouldn't take a Telesto over Divinity if I really need the Divinity. Probably wouldn't be taking Telesto. I would take Telesto over Jotun just because how many of the Void shards you get, the Void bolts, and just how much damage it does. And if you get a multi kill with it, it auto reloads Telesto. It's just a good gun. It has a fast fire rate or charge rate or whatever, if you will. It does a lot of damage and it's good in end game content as well, especially with some of the cheese stuff you can do with Telesto, like shooting enemies and damaging enemies through walls. Next we have Queensbreaker. I'd say it's actually worse than Sleeper, because Sleeper you can have the three bolts. Um the three bolts split out and do bonus damage, and then you can have the catalyst. This doesn't have a catalyst. I don't really see anyone use these, obviously, but I've never seen anyone use Queensbreaker, especially after its aim assistance nerf, but that was more of a Gambit PvP type of thing. PvE just doesn't do a lot of damage. It just doesn't, it's not helpful. It's like any of these guns would be better than you taking this. Next, we have Wave Splitter, F tier. I know it's the Void version of these two trace rifles. We have the Solar, the Arc, and then we have the Void. However, this does more damage over time hitting your targets. This technically does more damage. However, when you reach the end of the mag, because the oscillating beams, they like charge up or whatever, and then you can do even more damage with it if you pick up an Orb of Light before you start shooting. However, if this had a catalyst, so you can generate orbs off of multi-kills, so you can make a multi-kill or kill two enemies, they drop an orb, you pick up the orb, then you do damage with this gun because it procs its perk, then this would probably be like C tier or something. But the fact that you have to switch to another weapon that's Masterwork, create an Orb of Light, pick up the Orb of Light, then you can use Wave Splitter. It's just like, oh my god, it's just, you're so much better off using any of these other weapons. And the fusion area, we've got the last one, which is Equinox. Equinox is I want to say like D tier, really, especially after its nerf. The nerf to its the DR you get on the orb when you press control. I think the default is left control. I'm not sure what it is, or it might be left alt or something like that. I'm not sure what people's key bindings are, but when you bring up the shield with the orb, you used to have insane amounts of DR, and it would do a lot of damage, and it would suppress enemies. That was what made it really good. However, the fact that trace rifles suffer from the weird ammo economy thing, and then the fact that the orbs got nerfed, they're not as good as they once were, keeps it at a D tier. However, the orbs are still, they're pretty strong. Definitely is what puts it over a Wave Splitter, because of Wave Splitter's weird convoluted mess of just how you can get the most out of Wave Splitter. I just strongly believe that this is better than this. However, I would still take this over this just because of just how neutered this has become. in the game because of its nerf. And for fusions, I believe I've hit them all here. Alrighty, I've hit all the fusions. So next up we have pulse rifles. Bad Juju, I'm gonna give it a B tier. Giving it B tier because if you have the catalyst, um, it makes its rampage, quote unquote, rampage stacks last longer. It's not technically rampage, but it works like rampage. If you're getting the crit shots, it's you create infinite ammo with it. You also generate more super with this. However, it's got not really good range. It's good for like ad clearing, but why would it? I wouldn't take this over this, and I wouldn't take this over this, and I wouldn't take this probably over this because this has does slightly more damage to enemies than this, especially when you have the paracausal shot stack. This is also doing a little bit more work than this, even though you get the super faster using Bad Juju. And you do have full auto with this thing. It's just that pulse rifles are in a weird kind of limbo as well. They have to complete pulses, excuse me, have to compete with scout rifles, and scout rifles just do a little bit better and a little bit safer than pulse rifles, especially when the range on Bad Juju is quite crap compared to the range on a scout like Polaris or Dead Man's Tale. It's just not good. Next pulse rifle we have is Graviton Lance. Really a scout rifle, but it's a pulse rifle. It's a 2-burst pulse rifle. Honestly, it's just it's like a slightly worse Sunshot. The reason I say it's slightly worse is because it just, even though it technically shoots faster than Sunshot, it just feels really bad to use because of its slow fire rate. It's like 265 RPM. It's good for ad clear when you get the Graviton like void orbs to explode, and it's got really good range. It's just, I don't know. I just feel like I can spam this more than I can spam this. Um, it's just a slightly worse version of Sunshot. Next, in the pulse rifle department, we have Outbreak Perfected. Gonna be an A tier for me. Definitely not an S tier, but it is a very strong weapon to be using, especially with the nanites. How the nanites work with Outbreak. Shoots like a laser, really easy to use. It's got Outlaw on it. When you get headshot kills, it leaves the nanites in the wake of the dead body, and the nanites can attach to other enemies and do damage to them. It's it's a very good weapon. It can double as a boss or like a major or mini boss damaging weapon, and it can be an ad clear weapon. So it's a solid gun. It's an A tier gun, but it's not S tier. It just, I take this over Outbreak. I take this over Outbreak. I probably take this over Outbreak. I definitely take this over Outbreak. Maybe this could achieve like S minus, but I really just give S tier guns. They're just S. There's no S plus or S minus. It's just S. This would probably be like A plus. What else for the pulse rifles? What else we got here? Vigewing F tier. You only really benefit if all the members of your fire team are dead. However, in most instances of endgame content, the only time that would ever happen is maybe in a GM, but you're not going to be using a 5-burst pulse rifle in a GM. You're probably going to be using Izanagi's in a GM. This is a PvP weapon at heart. It was designed for PvP. If you are grinding the catalyst, you have to take it into PvP to get blood for blood kills and PvP kills with it. It's just, that's what it was designed for. It's not a PvE weapon. Next up on the pulse rifle list, we've got No Time to Explain. And No Time to Explain, I'm gonna give it a B tier, right around Bad Juju. You can make infinite ammo off of it if you're hitting crits. You can just keep hitting crits, keep doing damage. I really like the ghost that you generate off of it. The Ghost just does a lot of damage. It hits hard because it's a 340 RPM pulse rifle. It shoots like a laser. It's got really, really good overall stats. It's full auto. It's probably not as good as Bad Juju. Bad Juju is probably like a B plus, and this is like a B minus, if not like a C plus. But you know, yeah, honestly, probably C, just because of how good the perks on Bad Juju are compared to No Time to Explain. In terms of pulse rifles, I believe that's it. All right, moving on, we're going to be talking about swords. Black Talon, PvE, C. You can spam the heavy with it. But it's not like I would take this over a heavy like this or a heavy like this. It's definitely a good gun. It's kind of slept on. The heavy attacks are spammable, even though the subsequent heavy attacks don't do as much damage as the initial heavy attack. It's still a good sword to be using in PvE. It's not the greatest, and it's got a lot of reserves, which is also what kind of keeps it at the C tier, not at the D tier. So if you don't have any other swords, or you don't have any other exotics to be using, or a better like legendary rocket than this, then this can definitely fit the bill. Next up, in terms of swords, exotic swords, we have Wordline F tier. Yeah, you could use this in the past for speedrunning, and you still technically can use it in some weird speedrunning fashion with the Hunter Shadow Dive, but its ammo reserves is less than this. This just can do more because this is technically a range sword, if you will. This just exists. It's just, I don't have to justify really why it's an F tier. It just sucks. It's not a good sword. Next, in the sword department, we have Lament. Lament, yeah, not F tier, obviously. It's I don't it's an A tier for me. The reason it's not S tier is because of just how it works with the heavy attack charge time. Yeah, you heal, but I'm not going to be taking this into endgame content at all. Swords just don't really have a place in endgame content. Yeah, it's really useful in the raid, especially against Atrax, and it's useful in like a lot of PvE content, but I don't find myself using this in Master Strikes or GM Strikes, or other raids really. I feel like Falling Guillotine just does what this could do better still, and FG is just brain dead easy to use compared to this. Although FG is getting nerfed, I believe Vortex frames are getting nerfed, so this might be better than over FG. I don't know. We'll have to see in season 14 how that turns out. But just an A tier from me. Not S tier. It's not like it's destroys bosses, especially with the sword nerfs that have been happening. It's solid, but it's not like, it's not, it's just better than average, but it's not the best. Next, we have auto rifles. And yes, I know this is technically a shotgun auto rifle, but it's still an auto rifle at heart. Cerberus or Kerberos +1, however you want to say it. F tier, even with the catalyst. When you get the catalyst makes this useless because the catalyst does absolutely nothing to help its cause. It's a meme weapon like Colony. Yeah, you can use it for ag clear, but its range is severely limited. It's not got a lot of shit going on for it in its perk department. It's just F tier for me. Next auto rifle, we have Hard Light. Hard Light, D tier. Holding it over Kerberos and these other weapons just because you can change the energy type Arc Solar Void with this bad boy. When you bounce the bullets, they do increase damage. It was Cancer, in PvP when 600s, and this thing, its bouncing damage used to do so much more damage to enemy guardian targets. However, in PvE, it's not a, it's not an average weapon. It's slightly below average. It's just like it exists, but it's not completely useless. Next, for the auto rifles, we have Monte Carlo, Monte Carlo, excuse me. Uh, Gonna have to give it a C tier. It's just like a workhorse gun. You use it like Crimson, you use it like Ace or whatever. It's better than Hardlight because you can get your melee back off of Monte Carlo, allowing you to set up for some builds, and then you get the damage of the Markov chains from Monte Carlo. I would just hold this a little bit above this. It's just an average okay gun. Um, Next auto rifle we have is Suros Regime. Gonna give this C tier. You get the healing off of it. Better chance of healing if you have the catalyst. Spinning up is really the only thing you're going to be using. Dual receiver is absolutely useless. I really think they need to buff dual receiver or have it so it's like Kerberos where you can just hold, reload, and swap between the modes. It's like Monte Carlo. It's an average weapon. You're going to be using it for ad clear, obviously not boss damage, but it kind of exists, really. Honestly, probably D tier, just because it's just not got a lot going on for it currently. Monte Carlo just has that little buff because you get the Markov chain stacks, and then you also get your melee back potentially. It does a little bit more. Sweet business. Gonna go with F tier. I know you get a lot of ammo with this gun, but it's just like I would take this over this just because I can potentially heal, whereas this can't. Um, yeah, it's just kind of like a meme gun, really. I'll just leave it at that. Next auto rifle, Tommy's Matchbook, F tier. Reason being F tier is you got to damage yourself in order to start getting use out of this gun. Because you hip fire, it does the burn stacks to you, and then you start doing like increased damage. However, you're not going to be wanting to be in low health unless you're sitting in like a well or a rift or whatever. It's just you want health. You want your health to stay at max in PvE content. You're not going to be wanting to damage, and even in PvP content, this is like F tier because you want health. You don't want to be, you know, you don't want to be without health. Maybe if you're sitting in a rift or a well, then this has more potential, but it's like a meme weapon again. Uh, in terms of auto rifles, I believe that's it. Yep. Next up, we have rocket launchers. First rocket launcher is Deathbringer. Deathbringer, uh, probably a C tier for me. It does a lot of damage, especially when you aim up high and you let the orbs kind of sink down. However, because you have to let the orbs sink down, slowing how much damage you can do with it, it's probably like D tier for me. It's just Warcliffe Coil could be doing more damage than this. Warcliffe Coil, you can just shoot it off faster. You can just do more direct damage just faster. Uh, yeah, D tier for me. Next up, of course, we have is the Warcliffe Coil. Um, just B tier for me. Just to the sheer amount of rockets and damage that this thing can do. It's definitely not the boss melter it once was, but it is still a very decent weapon to be using. It's definitely better than Deathbringer for sure, and it's definitely better than Darcy, I feel like as well. Um, in terms of the heavy slot, I'd say it's slightly better than Prospector just because of how weird Prospector is with you have to shoot all your shots, let go of the trigger, and then everything explodes. I just feel like that just kind of holds Prospect. If like you could tap another button to detonate all your grenades for Prospector, that would be awesome. I think that would make Prospector better, but since you can't do that, then yeah, C tier. This is staying at C tier, and this gets the B tier treatment. Truth, F tier. it's a PvP gun for tracking. It doesn't do a lot of damage because it doesn't hit your target. It detonates close to it to do the splash damage. Um, it's not really a damaging weapon real at all. It's just F tier, yeah. Two-tailed, especially after the rocket launcher buffs. I use this in GM content. I'd say S tier, honestly, just with how much damage it does, how you can do both solar and void damage to targets. The void suppresses targets as well. It's good. And it locks. It's got relatively good ammo capacity, I'd say. So yeah, S tier for me. It does work. Like I probably wouldn't take, although to be honest, it's probably more like A tier because I probably wouldn't take this over this, but it still does work. This is probably like A plus, if anything. Next rocket, I believe, is Eyes of Tomorrow. It's it's like B tier really. It's just like a Warcliffe coil that shoots a little bit slower. It's like B minus. This is like probably like B. Um, it's got that weird bug currently, so it doesn't do as much damage to ads. It's an it's a weird version of Warcliffe Coil. These two guns are essentially the same. This is the arc, and then this is the solar. I think that's it for rocket launchers. We're coming into the home stretch here. It's going to be a long little guide, but I like to explain everything of why I think certain guns deserve to be in certain slots. So next up we have sidearms, exotic sidearms, Devil's Ruin, F tier. I know you can stun champions with this, Unstoppables, but it's just why? It's just why are you using this over like a hand cannon that has a little bit more stun range than Devil's Ruin? Yeah, it could be good for like low tier ad clear and some major and elite damage, but it's just like why? Why would you use this when I could use this? This is probably better than this, even though this has slightly worse ammo economy than Devil's Ruin. It's just heck, I'd even take this over this just because this has some range, whereas this doesn't. It's kind of a meme weapon again. It's like a cool, interesting weapon idea, like Tommy's Matchbook or the Carus. It's just exists. It's there. Rat King D tier for me. Only really benefit off of Rat King's perks if you have more than one person in your fire team running Rat King. However, most people don't want to handicap their fire team by running Rat King. It's a meme weapon like this. However, this when you get kills with it, it makes you invis and it gives you health regen if you have the catalyst. So that alone just gives it more of a like a power boost than this sidearm or using this, because at least with this you can use a rocket launcher that's actually a legendary rocket launcher that actually does more damage than this. So yeah. The next sidearm we've got is the only other is Traveler's Chosen. Traveler's Chosen, I give it a C tier. Reason it's not higher is while yes you can get your abilities back faster using this weapon, it's a sidearm. Let's be real here. You're not going to be using sidearms in endgame content or most content in general. It's just they're in a weird limbo on PC, similar to how scouts and pulse rifles compete with each other. It's a good weapon because it's like Monte Carlo. You get some perks of getting your abilities back faster. However, that's really the only thing that Traveler's Chosen has going for it, is being able to get your abilities back faster with it. Next up we have are the machine gun exotics. Heir Apparent, let's say D tier. You got the shield going, but if your arc shield's up and anything arc lands on you, you just die. It does damage, but it's just kind of like a meme gun. It does slightly. This is doing slightly more damage than I'd say this. But honestly, this is like specific content. If you're against arc targets, you're fucked if you're using this thing. Next LMG we've got is Thunderlord. Thunderlord, I'd say C tier. It does work. It's not a boss damaging weapon because LMGs have reduced damage to boss targets. However, it's a good ad clearing weapon. It's just a good LMG to have, especially if you don't have any other good exotics or legendaries to replace in that slot. And then the last LMG we have is Xenophage, instant S tier. This thing is a beast in in-game content. Can definitely compete with Anarchy because it has longer range. Just does a lot of damage. It's a reliable gun to be using. Next, we have shotguns. We have Acreus. Acreus, I'd say, is like D tier. It's not completely useless like some of these heavy weapons. However, I wouldn't say it's average really. It does a lot of damage. It just doesn't have a lot of perks going on for it. Especially you need the catalyst, and I don't think you can get the catalyst for this anymore. If they've implemented a way to get the catalyst for it. The catalyst gives it deeper reserves, so you get more in the mag. I think by itself it has 2. For the catalyst, you get 4. I don't know, and since if you can't get the catalyst, having only 2 shots in a exotic shotgun doesn't make it very good. Or I think it gives it 7 shots and then base is 4. I think I might be mistaken. It's just like it's not average. It's below average, but it's not completely useless. Next shotgun, Lord of Wolves. I give it C tier. With the nerfs it got and its combination to scabs, its ammo economy is a little wonky. It definitely can melt majors and maybe some mini bosses, but I don't with where this sits at compared to some of the legendary slug shotguns that exist in this game, like it's directly competing with those, and I don't know if what this has going on for it can directly compete with like a god roll first in last out with like auto loading and vorpal on it. Like I don't know if Lord of Wolves can keep up with that type of shotgun. Next up we have Chaperone F tier. Even though it is a slug and slugs do more damage to target, it's a PvP weapon at heart. Honestly, it's just not a PvE gun. Next shotgun we have is, damn, I knew I would forget one gun's name. It's the Fourth Horseman. Um, give it A tier treatment. It does a lot of damage. I know it doesn't see a lot of usage in PvE. However, the fact that you can do just insane amount of burst damage with it, especially if the catalyst for it just it does work. It's like Telesto. It's the Telesto. It's the shotgun of Telesto. It doesn't break the game, obviously, but it just does a lot of work. And this is doing more work than this is for sure. Especially in terms of damage. Like, you could use this for boss damage, where this you probably could not. And this does, like, nerf boss damage versus this doing its full potential. And then the last 2 shotguns we have is Tractor. I gave Tractor probably A tier just because you can still do bonus damage and you can suppress targets with it. You're not using this though. This probably is doing more damage to this. This is like a crappy divinity, honestly, and then it suppresses targets. But it's definitely better than all these just because of it's like a crappy divinity, really. Duality, it's a PvP gun. F tier for me. I'm not gonna go more into depth. It's just like Chaperone. It's a PvP gun. And then last but not least, we have our 3 SMGs here. So Risk Runner, it's C tier. It's definitely higher when you're against arc opponents, like the Fallen and Hive Wizards or whatever, and some Hive that are arc. It definitely slays in that type of content. However, generally speaking, in all forms of content, you don't have a lot of arc enemies. You're not going to be against Fallen all the time. it's like a workhorse gun. It just gets it done. And you can proc the perk on yourself by throwing an arc nade at your feet. And then it turns it into a pretty damn good gun, but you're not always going to be running arc subclasses when using this gun. Especially, and depends on what PvE content you're doing. Next up, Teraba. I give it the B tier, especially when you have Ravenous Beast proc. However, it forces you, the way the perk works, it forces you to use this gun. However, you're gonna find more usage or like more ways to use Teraba and PvE content than you can get out of Risk Runner. Just because in order for Risk Runner's full potential to be met is you need to be against arc enemies or have a way to proc Arc Conductor on yourself. Versus this, just it can proc itself. You don't need to use a specific subclass, or you don't need to be up against a specific enemy type to proc Teraba's perks. And then Huckleberry, I give it an A tier just because of how it has the unnerfed rampage stacks. It's just a very good workhorse as slaying weapon. Definitely better than this, because this you're forced to keep Teraba out, whereas this you just can bring it out whenever. And it reloads from gives you infinite ammo off of your kills technically. So pretty damn good weapon to be using. And yeah, that concludes the tier list for all the current exotic weapons in the game and my reasoning behind it. And if you enjoyed this video, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. I'll see you guys in the next